All right, everybody, this video is going to demonstrate how to make a thread shanked button. We've got a button, a sample piece of muslin, a needle with a doubled thread, and a knot tied at the end. And I'm using an awl as a spacer. That's what this tool is called, AWL. I'll be giving you matchsticks most likely to use. You just need a little something to space behind the button. You'll see how to use this as we go through the demonstration. First thing I want you to do is thread your needle and tie a knot, double thread like we said. Take your sample piece and fold it in half short ways. Excuse me. If our sample pieces are 3 by 6, 3 inches by 6 inches, folding it in half should give you a finished dimension of 3 by 3. All right, now to attach this, first thing you're gonna do, let's say I wanna sew my button on right there, right? So that's the center of my button. If you imagine this 4-hole button is getting sewn on there, if that's the center, I'm technically going to be sewing around here. So if you imagine 4 little dots kind of in the equal spacing, that may help you just visualize some of what you're about to sew. The first thing you're going to do is take your needle and come through the back of the fabric right in one of those 4 points. Now once you've done that, you've got your button and your fabric. We went through the top right hole. Let's go through the top right hole of this button. Now, to sew that button on, you're going to need to go back through the button. So do that. Back through the button. Yep. And you're going to put the needle through the corresponding place of the fabric as well. Now, here's where your spacer comes in. As you draw this down, see that? You're going to want to put something to hold this button off the fabric. The reason we make thread shanked buttons is so that this button can sit through a thicker fabric. It works really well for suspender buttons on pants. The suspender hardware is pretty thick, so you want this button to not sit right against the surface of the fabric. You want it to sit up. So we put this little spacer on there. And we're just going to sew the button like normal. I'm going to sew the button on with the spacer and then show you how to do the thread shank. It is the very last step. I just wanted to show you a few samples of sewing with the spacer on. So I'm just going to sew around this piece. See how I'm just sewing the button on like normal? You should just sew this on like a normal 4-hole button, but just holding your matchstick or whatever your space is in place while you do it. When I come back, I'll have the button completely sewn on and show you how to shank before you tie off. All right, at this point I have sewn through everything. I'm taking my last stitch. You're gonna go from the front to back of the button. And at this point, you can remove your spacer. When I do so, just slide that out. And my button should be sitting up off of my fabric. And it is. Do you see that? How there's some space there? Well, it's hard to show. But at this point, you take your needle and going from the back of the fabric to the front, you want to come out between the fabric and the button. Don't go through the hole of the button. Draw that thread down. Don't pull it too tight. You don't want to ruin all the space you've created. And then to shank this button, you're just going to wrap the thread around this part. You see how back here it's creating let me see if I can show you that. It's creating a little thickness. You want to pull the thread tight while you do it, and you wrap around about 6 or 7 times. And that gives you what's called a thread shank. You can kind of see that if we zoom in a little. And to knot that off, you either take bites in the fabric to do your knot, or I like to actually sew around some of the thread to do my knots. Either way, don't forget to sew knots at the end when you've made your thread shank. And that's how you make a thread shank. That is one beautifully thread shanked button. See how you can even see it sits up off the fabric a little bit from there.